Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about navigating the twists and turns of life and embracing the imperfections of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches Catherine and Kirsty, and our mission is to support you in finding your own path, your own way, with greater clarity and self trust, no matter how messy or uncertain things may seem.
We address the roadblocks that come up time and time again for our coaching clients, from acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
As well as asking lots of questions, a coach's favourite thing to do, we'll be sharing thoughts and insights and offering plenty of tips, tools, and techniques for you to try.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. This week, we're talking about that situation which we often find ourselves in when in our minds we're thinking no, and yet somehow what we say is yes. We're going to talk about what on earth is going on. Why do the two things not match? So, Kirsty, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are that it happens a lot for me. But I think for many of us, saying no is often hard, isn't it? And you can hear all
Yeah.
the stuff about, no is a complete sentence. I mean, that may very well be true. And, just say no, probably sound advice, but it's much easier to say than to actually do, isn't it?
I think just
And
no, and then silence is quite it's quite hard not to fill it with because and why and excuses and stuff that starts to sound less and less plausible, right?
and then talking yourself into saying yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the end of it, yes, you said
It,
yes.
and sometimes it's not even about having to actually say no. It's about not saying yes. If you don't put
Yeah.
your hand up when a volunteer is needed, or if you don't step forward when a request for help goes out to a group, that can feel bad. The feeling that you should be saying, yeah, I'll help out. You don't even have to say no at that point. It's about not saying yes.
Mm.
But I think many of us keep doing it. We don't say no, even if we don't want to. And we keep saying yes, even though we don't want to.
Yeah.
And I mean, that not saying no, or the saying yes, however you like to look at it. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to frame that as a strength. It can be proof that we're kind, caring, considerate, empathetic, helpful, reliable, generous. Add more words to this
Yeah.
list. And it may well be very true. On the other hand, you can also frame it as a bit of a weakness, can't you? It shows we're doormats who end up being taken for granted and taken advantage of. And that doesn't feel nearly as good.
It's about trying to find that balance, isn't it? Like most things
Yeah.
we talk about,
Yeah.
it's about maybe there are times when you do want to show that you're being helpful and reliable and all of those things, but not to your detriment. I think that's the balance that we're trying to strike, isn't it? That you don't want to be the doormat that's taken advantage of and will is known to say yes. So actually the one time that
Mm.
you do say no, everyone sort of keels over in horror. That how could you possibly say no because you're the one that always says yes, and yet other people who say no it's
Yeah.
okay for. So it just seems that's sort of grossly unfair, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I appreciate it. It's hard to, as it often is in life, to just keep navigating that sort of nice tightrope down the middle, isn't it?
Absolutely. And let's be get this out of the way first. There are plenty of times when saying yes feels right for people and we want to do it, and that is not a problem.
Yeah,
We're
that
not
falls into
talking.
the thinking yes and saying yes camp, right?
Yeah, it would exactly. If you're thinking yes and you're saying yes, then this is not a problem. You don't need to stop saying yes just because you don't want to be a doormat. If you actually want to do it, it makes you feel good. There is not a problem. It's only when you've got that sort of no in your head and you find yourself saying yes, that's what we're talking about. So, what happens when you do that? What happens if you want to say no and you don't? Well, I mean, if you keep doing it, if it gets extreme, it can lead to burnout, right? It's the fairly obvious conclusion because you just keep doing stuff you don't want to do. You keep doing more for other people. You keep taking on more. Less time for yourself, less time to rest, burnout. Another, I think, fairly obvious one can be resentment. You end up resenting the people who are asking you to do these things. And there can be that kind of feeling that they should realize that you don't want to do it, that they should stop asking. And you just mentioned how other people say no and it's okay for them. Why not for me? It can become, you can end up quite a lot of resentment towards other people going on. And it will mean lying about or suppressing how you're feeling and what you actually want. And that kind of thing, yes, we all have to compromise sometimes, of course. We're all going to do it sometimes. But consistently and persistently doing that becomes damaging. It leads to stress, and stress is a gateway to all sorts of health problems, mental and physical. In purely practical terms, it means a lot less time to do what you want to do and what you need to do for your own well-being. And it can create quite a victim mentality, that feeling of being put upon, that it always has to be you, that nobody really appreciates you.
Yeah.
Well,
Overall, not particularly good news, I think we say. I think one of the downsides as well is that it means we're kind of assuming people might be able to mind read, like they deep down, like you said, we might assume that people know really we don't want to, or they should do, but actually they don't.
yes.
People aren't mind readers. I think unless they hear a no sometimes, they might assume that you are always willing and capable and able and not make the connection of these things.
Mm.
Or worse, they might know that and be prepared to ignore it. And the only person that can really not ignore it is ourselves when we have to, we're the ones
Yeah.
that have to act in our own best interests, aren't we?
Yes, and I think you're quite right, that mind reading thing. Usually subconsciously, I think, but it's that kind of a why can't they see how tired I am? Why can't they see how unfair this is? They should be able to. And when they're asking me anyway. Yeah. So I guess this leads to a question of what is it that makes us say yes when we don't want to? And does that false yes actually help us, benefit us in some way? And I think possibly the most obvious reason we say yes when we don't want to is the fear of rejection. If we say no, people won't want us. We'll end up excluded and lonely. And when we say yes, it means other people are more likely to think about and include us. I mean, and that can apply right across the board, can it? It can be, your family, people within your family. It can be existing friendships and relationships and work colleagues. And it can be about trying to fit in with new people, new mums when your kid goes to school and, new neighbours or something, your new partner's family, whatever. That being willing to say yes means they are more likely to accept you and include you. Whereas if you say
Yeah.
no, who do they think they are? They're not very helpful, are they? We don't really want them around. So if you say yes in those circumstances because you're worried that you're going to be rejected in some way if you don't say yes, does it help you? And talking about balance, I'm going to suggest
Yes.
yes and no because we'd like to
We
be
like to
balanced.
say yes and no, don't we? When we answer a question, yes, and also no. We shall explain.
Who needs black and white, hey? Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the chances are that saying yes to everything when somebody asks you to help out or do stuff with them will cause them to think about you more and want to keep you on side and make them more likely to include you. So in that respect, the yes is helping you, you're getting what you want. But if they end up, whether consciously or unconsciously, thinking of you as some kind of doormat who's going to take whatever treatment is meted out to them, that isn't really inclusion, is it? And there's always a difference between not being rejected and actively belonging, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. I think that's such an important point because actually, I'd say that the doormat treatment, if you like, absolutely isn't inclusion and belonging. That's more like providing almost a service, like
Yeah,
fulfilling a need, like being obligated. It's not actually very nice, which is also obviously what being rejected is. But this is also another potentially a kind of rejection. Like
yeah,
you're fulfilling this need and purpose for me, not really being included in my valuable, needed, and wanted people.
yeah.
So yeah,
You're,
I
a
think that's a really healthy perspective.
you're a service provider, not a genuine friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of one step up from that fear of rejection, I think something that makes us say yes when we don't want to is people pleasing. And I see that as the step up from fear of rejection because it's not just about not being rejected, it's about actively wanting other people to like us, to think well of us. And when we're in people pleasing mode, my take on it is that we need to know that the person we're trying to please is pleased. We
Yeah.
need them to tell us or to show us, and maybe to tell or show others how much they appreciate what it is we're doing. So if you're giving that false yes, does it help with that? Well, again, being so balanced, yes and no.
Yeah.
Uh, because most people will express gratitude for the things you do for them, and that feels good if you're trying to please somebody and they're telling you they're pleased. That everyone's happy, right? But when it becomes the norm, their recognition is likely to become a bit less effusive and probably less satisfying.
Definitely. It's probably going to become expected, almost like, oh, you're not doing it. Like,
Yeah,
if you ever did dare say no, it's almost like the opposite. You're in the bad books, not getting the thanks for doing it, but getting just an
yeah,
expectation that it's the norm and this is how we roll. So
exactly. Yeah, that they may keep thanking you, but if they're just doing it in the same way, it's not. It's going to feel samey rather than genuine. And yeah, as you say, you're going to end up feeling a bit taken for granted, probably resentful, bit of the whole victim mindset, and that's probably going to sour the relationship somewhat. I mean, maybe superficially it'll carry on the same, but the way you feel about the relationship is definitely going to change. So in that respect, the that false yes does not help in the long run. I think peer pressure is another big one for saying yes, isn't it? Because others are helping out or doing it, or they're saying it's the right thing to do, or just kind of expecting you to join in with it. You feel you have to do it. You feel you have to
mm,
go along with it and say yes. That somehow it's unreasonable not to, that you're going to stand out for all the wrong reasons if you don't join in. And I mean, to some degree, we all want to have common ground with and share experiences with and be like those around us or the people that we want to be around, right? So it can be really hard not to go along with what they're doing and what they expect of you. And again, does that false yes help? Well, superficially, obviously yes, because you're going to look like part of the crowd. You're you're going to, to all intents and purposes, appear that you're just normal and one of the gang, same as everybody else. But if you've got that sense that you're doing it because you feel you have to, rather than because you understand why everybody else is doing it, that sense that you don't feel the same way about it as they do is actually going to keep that sense of difference and not being part of the crowd going is going to enhance that.
I just thought of an example. I know we've spoken about this
Oh yeah,
before. It'd be like if a group of people said, "Oh, I know, let's all go sea swimming, something like that, or in a lake or something, that cold water swimming basically." And for some bizarre reason, I thought, right, I'll go to be included and get along
yeah,
with people. And if they're all enjoying themselves and I've got one toe in and I'm freezing to death, it's just it's going to highlight the differences way more to me, and I would not feel part of or included, or that I
yeah.
belong in this kind of situation, because yeah, my motivation is completely different, and my enthusiasm and all those things just would set me further apart, I think.
Yes, I recall your views on cold water swimming.
Yes. Do you know what? They're part of me. I understand the people who do it, they really do love it. And I can imagine it is completely exhilarating and you
mm,
get a real high afterwards. I think that's why people do it. I just can't imagine going through the suffering to get the high afterwards. I think I've got to find a different way to get that kind of virtuous high that doesn't involve freezing somewhere. That's not my bag.
no, I don't feel any desire to do it either. It's funny, isn't it? And yet I can recognize the high I can get after running, which hurts. So yeah, different levels and different kinds of discomfort suit different people, perhaps, in finding that high.
Yeah. I think I'd
But
form a
yeah,
biscuit appreciation club. That would be my
oh yes,
yeah, you're
yes. But
invited.
if you
It's good.
But if people came along because they thought it was the new big thing to be doing, because obviously it would go viral, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than because they like biscuits, then that wouldn't feel the same for them.
No, exactly. Whereas I know fully I would belong in a biscuit appreciation club.
No downsides to that, right?
Yeah. Sorry, we digress. Let's go back to so we've talked about peer
Biscuits.
pressure.
Yeah. And I think kind of linked to that is the whole self-doubt thing, isn't it? When you're worried that you're not good enough, that you're not measuring up in some way, saying yes to doing things for others can give you evidence that you are a good, kind person, that you're worthy and worthwhile, and you have value. So does a false yes help with that? I don't think it really does. I mean, yes, it may give you a bit of a boost to consider all the times that you've said yes, all the things you've done to help others when you didn't really want to. But performing good enough is a million miles away from feeling good enough. And if you have to keep a scorecard to demonstrate your worth, you are not feeling worthy.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not going to make that much of a difference. And the last reason that I came up with is, well, I've labeled it in two slightly different ways. Empathy slash fear of the reaction. By which I mean the worry that a refusal, saying no to something, is going to cause the other person to feel bad. Maybe they'll be upset or hurt or stressed or let down or angry. And we don't want them to feel that. And if we're being honest, many of us won't want to deal with the possible fallout from somebody else feeling bad. So in that situation, does the false yes help? Well, obviously, yes, in that the other person doesn't feel bad. So mission accomplished in that respect. And it avoids any unpleasant fallout from a refusal. But no, in that it creates, I think, a perception within us that others aren't being sensitive to our feelings in the way we're being sensitive to theirs. There's the feeling of it being a one-way street, and then we get back to the whole resentment and victimhood thing going on, don't we?
Yeah.
If your main aim is to avoid any unpleasantness with anyone, any difficult conversations, or whatever, then yes, saying yes all the time will benefit you. But will it actually
Yeah.
make you feel better in the long run? Probably not.
I think I think all of those are absolutely valid. And I think sometimes it just comes down to a very straightforward. Sometimes we say yes when we're thinking no because we think we need to offer more of an explanation than is palatable for the
Mm.
recipient than perhaps we need to or even can give. And we don't want to lie. So we don't say something like, compare this. Like, I can't come to your hen do because I've just had major surgery and can't walk yet. That sounds like a very reasonable and palatable response to saying no, compared to I can't come to your hen do because that sounds absolutely ghastly to me. Okay, I'm not suggesting you'd actually say that, but you know what I mean? If that was the real reason, you don't want to say that, you don't feel like you can offer that as a reason, you don't want to lie or make excuses, so you end up saying yes. And in
Oh
short,
yeah.
saying yes when you're thinking no is rarely a good thing long term. I think you've highlighted sort of the short term gains potentially
Mm.
from those false yeses, but long term, definitely, I think there's definitely a negative impact. But we know that saying no is harder, especially when you're not used to doing it, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was easier to say yes then than no. Um, yeah, saying no when you are used to putting others first, and actually that's the sort of a heading we haven't mentioned at the moment, especially for women. I think you are raised with that sense that your role is a caring role, that that's what being a
Mm.
woman is fundamentally about. You are supposed to be caring. You are supposed to put others first. And to sort of turn around to somebody and say, no, I am not going to help you with that. No, I am not going to come out with you when you want to go. That feels like a rejection of everything you've been taught, whether consciously or unconsciously, that you should be, that you are. And that's a difficult place to put yourself in, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in short, if you want to say yes, if a yes feels good to you, say it. You don't have to say no to make a point. It's and sometimes I would suggest it is perfectly reasonable and healthy to say yes when you don't really want to. We all make compromises, and sometimes it is about recognizing that somebody else is in a situation where you're going, if I were in that situation, I would really appreciate it if somebody else did this for me. And even though I'm a bit tired and grumpy about life and don't really want to do it, I'm going to do it because I think in this instance it matters.
Yeah.
Those kind of occasions will happen. And that isn't a problem. But that constant feeling that you can't say no, even though you want to, that you cannot put your own needs first, that is a problem. And in next week's episode, we're going to be doing one all about tips, tools, and techniques for saying no when you want to. And that one will be called Thinking No, Saying No. See what we did there? But in the meantime, we will, of course, leave you with a little question. So, what most often causes you to say yes when you're thinking no? And how do you feel about that?
I think by that you mean it's not necessarily just the circumstances that you're saying yes to that happens more often. It's those things that you said, like fear of rejection. Is it the people pleasing, the peer pressure, the self-doubt, the empathy or fear of the reaction, the
Mm,
not wanting to lie? Or is it something else? It could be something that we haven't mentioned.
yeah,
And if so, please do let us know in the comments. We'd be very interested to hear that. Otherwise, I think we will be back next week for our tips, tools, and techniques for when you do actually want to say no. Because I think what our message is, yes, there will be times that we're going to say yes, but let's balance that with sometimes that we can feel that we say so it's in our pocket. So at least we can say no sometimes when we want to as well.
yeah.
Excellent. So we will be back next week for that episode. In the meantime, take care. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of our episodes, especially if you've had a light bulb moment in answering one of the questions, have benefited from one of the tips, or have a suggestion for an episode topic.
And if these conversations have made you curious about how coaching could help you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with one or both of us to find out more about what we offer. Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.